February 20th. I went to IKEA today. We were running out of candles, something essential in my household as we use a candle as our main light source after dark. It saves energy and the relative darkness helps me fall asleep better. I also got this, just for fun. And to inaugurate it, I thought I give you what is traditionally thought of as the natural progression of human societies based on a theory developed by the French economist Turgot in the second half of the 18th century. Smith, Keynes and so on took his words as fact when they developed capitalism. So, according to Turgot, and stop me if you heard this before, humankind started out living in tiny bands in a prolonged state of childlike innocence as hunter-gatherers. Since the groups were so small, they could be egalitarian. At some point we adopted agriculture, and when cities, surplus happened. Down here are the cities. Surplus happened, and as societies developed, natural differences in talents and capacities between individuals surfaced. They became more pronounced and eventually formed a basis for an ever more complex division of labor. With this came everything bad in human life, like the patriarchy, standing armies, mass executions, bureaucracy, poverty, and dispossession of some. However lamentable, especially the last two, poverty and dispossession, are therefore, according to Turgot, a necessary condition for the prosperity of a society as a whole. What's the problem with this is that none of it is based on any direct evidence of what human social life had been in the past. But Europe, at that point when Turgot was coming up with his theory, was suddenly faced with societies that dared to criticize them and, even more importantly, offered other models of organizing that even Europeans considered as superior in North America and South America. It was written about in books, screamed from the theater stages, and debated in the salons. Turgot's model allowed the ruling class to explain the critique away elegantly by shaping what was seen as better as actually the ancient inferior model that was only possible when everyone was equally poor. If you want progress, you had to accept a general lack of freedoms and the destitution of some, hierarchy and rich. And henceforth, this was the official story. And it is still presented to students today and was favored, not least because this story is the source of the authority of any modern state today, born out of the idea that the cities developed naturally in lockstep with centralized government and top-down control. It says there's no other way of organizing so many people. Someone has to be in charge and enforce the rules with force or at least the threat of thereof. We have direct evidence today from many sites around the globe, and this evidence says this is all wrong. Especially the history of urbanism must be completely rewritten. Take the sites discovered east of today's city of Uman in the Ukraine. The sites date back to 4000 to 3200 BC. They were in use for 800 years. They covered between 100 and 300 hectares and are situated in easy distance of each other. So people living there could communicate with each other and work with each other. All of this is very similar to what have always been considered the first cities in Mesopotamia. But other than in those cities, at the sites in Ukraine, there is no evidence to be found for temples, palaces, central administration, rich burials, or any other sign of centralized control or social inequality. What has been found are more than 1,000 equally sized domestic buildings arranged in in several large circumferences around a mysteriously empty center. These buildings seem to have been divided into a system of self-governing districts with assemblies for local decision-making. Inhabitants burned the structures down in regular intervals to rebuild and fit them to the new circumstances. See, left room for creativity, for the new. The site's economy was surprisingly diverse and sustainable, including gardening, livestock, orchards, and a wide spectrum of hunting and foraging. No agriculture. The inhabitants showed also high levels of creativity and domestic culture. It was like an art colony there. And did I mention that they were organized in a real democracy thousands of years before Greece? And that according to a study by the University of Kiel, the inhabitants might have set in motion the process that created the fertile black soils the region is known and desired for, even today? These sites challenge so many theoretical models, exemplified by the refusal of many experts to call these sites cities, because for urbanism, we so far always assumed the presence of hierarchy and control. That wasn't there, and from the city, the state was born. But when you think about it, cities are the least likely places to produce hierarchy and control. In the countryside, you can address people individually or in small groups and those at their weakest, while in the city, you are confronted with a collective force. Your theories can be dismantled in a city much faster, as it is tested by the beehive mind that can do fact-checking in real time. And in a city, people are surrounded by a network of diversity, what makes it hard to fearmonger. As I said, you have to question and to think about it. Make a habit out of thinking. Turn thinking into a movement, not to copy the old, but to come up with the courage and the freedom to get rid of old stories and replace them with something completely new. Like, comment and share, and as always, thank you for gifting me with a few minutes of your most precious, your lifetime.